Hello and welcome to Irresistible You, Ignite Your Passion and Purpose. I'm your host, Karen Seltz, and I am so excited to talk about this topic. I was inspired by a friend of mine who's a man, and I saw one of his reels, and it reminded me of where your true power comes from. And it's not what you think. It is just not. And I'm going to give you some stories to demonstrate this. And I'm going to share with you some examples from my life, from other people's lives. And you decide for yourself. And as I wrote in the description, prove me wrong. Show me an example where this is not true. And power, I'm going to tell you some definitions of power because I think it's important to really know what we're talking about here. So one definition of power is great or marked ability to do or act, the possession of control or command over people, authority, or influence. And the definition that I'm going for here is really standing in your truth, how to be comfortable enough in your own skin to authentically show up and not be swayed by what other people think or perceived rejection, but really standing your ground and owning who you are, what you believe, what you value in all situations, no matter what. And then another definition that I think is really important to share in this context is empower. To empower someone else means to make someone stronger and more confident, especially in controlling their life and claiming their rights. Or as I would say, like in owning their gifts, their talents, their abilities, and their opinions, their values, the things that they hold important. So I think those are both really important definitions, and that will be our springboard for this episode. So if you're just joining, thank you so much. I am so excited to embrace this topic. So let me first tell you about my friend who posted a reel. Now he was recently in the hospital with some heart issues, and they did some tests, and his arteries are clogged and one of his valves is failing. So he is facing open heart surgery. He's going to get, whatever they do, where they open up the arteries and a new valve installed. And he's very public. He is a speaker. He's done a TED Talk. And what I love about him is his ability to really talk about what he's feeling. And his vulnerability, for me, is such a sign of strength. And he got choked up. He was tearing up in his reel, and he posted it. And he's a man. And I'm like clapping in case the Zoom, filtered off the noise. I'm really clapping because how many people in this society, at least in this country, are so afraid of showing people who they really are, so afraid of talking about what they're afraid of, so afraid of being judged for their opinions or their perceived weaknesses. And I can totally relate to this because I grew up the only girl. I had two older brothers. And especially in the summertime, we had almost no parental supervision, at least during the day, because both of our parents worked. And I mean, all of our parents, both parents worked. You know what I mean? We had a mom and a dad, and they both worked. But there were three of us. Oh, I'm cracking myself up. I love when it goes this way. For me, that's way more fun than being scripted and perfect. So my mom erroneously thought my brothers were mature enough to watch all of us, right? To take care of us and that everything would go perfectly well. Well, that didn't happen. The messages I got growing up as the only girl, even though I had a mom, my mom was very, very masculine. She was a doer. She was the one that was like out mowing the grass and doing yard work until all hours of the night. She coached my softball team. She was very athletic. She was strong, and she was opinionated, and she was controlling, and all those masculine type qualities. She had them. Not me. Just kidding. I got them too. And I had a dad that gave us the message that women were less than, they were weaker. And then I had these two older brothers. And the message was anytime I cried, don't be such a girl. You're so girly, you're weak. And I associated being a girl or being emotional with being weak, with weakness and not enoughness. So I grew up, tough. I was afraid of nothing. I was afraid of everything, but I showed nothing. So I wore these masks and I was so full of crap. And I thought that I was being strong by not letting on that I was afraid, by hiding my emotions. Well, fast forward many, many, many years of stuffing those emotions. And there I am in a 12-step room full of men. I was the only woman and I was going through withdrawal. And for me, that looked like, oh shit, all these emotions are coming up and I don't know what to do with them because I'm not medicating them any longer. So here I am in a room full of men and I'm like, well, what else am I going to do? And I just was sobbing in a room full of men. And part of me was absolutely mortified to be thought of as, oh, she's a typical woman. I thought that was the biggest stab, like a slap in the face, like, oh, you don't want to be a woman. I don't, it's so interesting, right? So there's the typical woman crying and being emotional. Can't she be logical? And I really couldn't. I didn't have control over my emotions because I had stuffed them my entire life. And so I allowed myself to cry. And I kept saying in my head, I am playing a role for these men. I'm playing a role for them. They get to see me as a human being with feelings. And I was in an S program, if you know what that means. If you don't, I'll tell you. It was for sex addiction. So all of these men were sex addicts. And probably most of them, at least at one point in their lives, saw women as sex objects, not as human beings. And there I am being a human being. And they got to be really uncomfortable and sit with it. And when I left that meeting, maybe not right away, but eventually I'm like, oh my gosh, that took so much strength to allow myself to be seen, messy, messy, messy in all of it, like just sobbing and not being worried about being judged. Maybe I was worried, but allowing it anyway. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that is the strongest form of me, is being vulnerable. When I'm scared, saying I'm scared. When I don't know the answer, saying, I don't really know that. What do you think? Just being able to say where I am, what I think, what I feel in the moment. And I have another example of this. I actually started a meditation group. So I'm like the leader, right? I don't want to be the leader. I just happen to start it. And there's a woman that I absolutely adore. And I just got, I was going through some emotions on the way there and I was like, just feeling kind of down, but I was holding it together. And then this woman gave me a hug and I just started to cry. And I'm like, oh, and I'm like, I just melted into this woman. And it was really interesting because I spent so many years being clinically depressed and running from sadness. And what I've discovered over the years is when I allow those feelings to just have a safe place to express themselves, it passes in a minute or two, literally a minute or two. So she just hugged me and I cried for it was probably 30 seconds. And then I stopped. I'm like, thank you. I really needed that. I really needed someone to hold a safe space for me. And thank you for being that. And she said, you're welcome. And then I went and talked to somebody else and I was laughing because that emotion had an outlet. I let it be without judging it, without attaching to it. Now, here's the interesting thing. That woman kept looking at me later to make sure I was okay. And I realized everyone doesn't have this relationship with emotions that I do. And I didn't always have it. Just because I cry doesn't mean I'm not okay. It means I am going to be okay. I am okay while I'm crying. And I'm going to be experiencing another emotion in a minute or two, most likely. So the reason I'm telling you this is I know for so many of us, we grow up thinking that people are judging us. And so what? So what? They're going to judge us anyway. We might as well be authentic, because when we're authentic and vulnerable and we really share who we are and what we're feeling, it feels so good. It I can't even explain it. If you don't know what I'm talking about, please do it. Please give yourself permission, and not from a victim place, but you know what? I'm really experiencing some sadness. Would it be okay? Would it make you uncomfortable if I cried? Like, you can ask people, or do you have capacity to hold space for me while I cry, or to physically hold me if you're near me? And you can ask people permission. You don't like vomit your emotions on people. That's that's a whole nother story. But there were people around me, right? In this meditation, there were probably 20 other people there. And I don't care if they noticed. If they do, and it brings something up in them, perfect. You're welcome. My favorite saying. Because if they're uncomfortable with that, then there's probably some part of them that they've been holding back. And they're like, oh my gosh, she's actually letting people see that. And she's a leader. Huh. Is she okay? Is there something wrong with her? But does it really have anything to do with me? No. And I know that. I know it because I've practiced it so many times. So when they experience those judgments or those uncomfortable feelings, they then have the opportunity to look within and say, oh, this is really interesting. What's it bringing up in me? Would I be able to do that? Would I be comfortable with that? Or would I be really afraid to express myself, to let myself be seen, to cry in public and to be held, to express what was really true for me without fear of judgment? Or even if you do have the fear of judgment, doing it anyway, which is a form of stretching and growing, which is so fun. It can be addictive in a fun way. I was coaching in this transformational leadership program, and that was one of the practices, was stretching outside of one's comfort zone. And I did this so much that I developed a massive comfort zone. And I had a friend that was in a class that I was coaching, and I was talking to him, and I said, oh, I'm going downtown Phoenix, and there's this building there, this restaurant that has a glass floor elevator, and it is so scary. I cannot even stand on it. He's like, well, you ready for a stretch? I'm like, oh my gosh, are you kidding me? So I actually did it. I went in the elevator and I filmed it. And I mean, this is a crowded restaurant. And I'm filming it, and I looked down and I let out this screech, like blood curdling. I was so scared. It's only like 5 floors or whatever, but you're standing and it looks like you're going to fall to the basement. And I was so terrified. And then I posted that stretch as a coach. I posted that stretch in our Facebook group. And I believe in doing that. It gave the students who were just learning these concepts the ability to say, oh my gosh, look how scared she was. And she did it anyways. And she posted it. And she was terrified. I mean, there was no question that I was terrified. And I still have that video. And every now and then I watch it and just see the sheer terror on my face, because then I feel very proud of myself. So if you don't walk into those moments, if you don't lean in to the things that scare you, what ends up happening? Well, there's lots of conversations that go on, like, well, I disappointed myself again. Maybe I couldn't handle it. Maybe this, maybe that. And it reinforces these beliefs that you don't even want about yourself. So if you want to grow and stretch, there are ways to do it. And I believe that leaning into your truth, being vulnerable, sharing from the heart where you really are, what you're really afraid of. And I have another example of this, because I grew up in a household, we were not religious, but my parents used to send me to a Christian summer camp every year from the time I was 9 until I was 14 or something. And every year I would do the whole Christian thing. And I would come home and I would talk about the Bible and God. And well, the first year. And my parents laughed at me. They laughed at me. oh, there you are being a holy roller. And did you get born again? And they would make fun of me. And it was so incredibly painful. And I made up at that young age that it was not safe to talk about my spiritual beliefs. And so I was in the closet all the time, my whole life. I was spiritual and in the closet. And one-on-one, I would have these terrific conversations with people that would go so deep about what we really believed and what we experienced. And I was in this business coaching program, and we had a breakout room. And I said, well, the clients that I serve are really smart, analytical women that are holding themselves back in some way. This was back then. And the coach said, well, where are you holding yourself back? And I'm like, God, crap. And I knew it immediately. I'm like, I'm so afraid to talk about my spiritual beliefs because I don't believe that people will accept me. I think I'm going to get rejected, and I think people are going to make fun of me. So in that moment, I'm like, as soon as this meeting ends, I'm going on and doing a Facebook Live. And let me tell you, like, up until that moment, my Facebook Lives went like this. And welcome to blah, 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 blah. And I was like one note. I was like up here all the time. I was the cheerleader. I was happy, which was part of me, but that wasn't all of me. It was just this hype, who I thought I was supposed to be in order to show up on video. Well, this video was just a slight bit different. I was like terrified, and I was practically crying. I probably was, and I'm like, I was quiet too. I'm so terrified to tell you this. I'm so afraid that you're going to judge me, and I'm so afraid you're going to reject me. And I am committed to growth, and I'm committed to showing up authentically. So here goes. And I was like, my voice is breaking. And I just started to say what I believed spiritually. And I wasn't smiling. I was crying. I was a mess. I was quiet, but I was so freaking authentic. I was in my heart, and I just poured it out. And that video got more likes, more people commented, people texted me, people DM'd me, and they said, thank you for sharing that. I feel the same way, and I've been afraid to say it too. And I'm like, oh my gosh, all these years I've avoided this because I was afraid of being judged. And what I got was the exact opposite of that. Not one person said anything bad about me. Not one person said, you're going to hell. Not one person said, you're a freak. They all said, thank you for sharing. I feel your authenticity. I feel your heart. And now I can open up a conversation. I can now talk about these things. So that's the other thing. When you are vulnerable, you don't know who needed to hear it. You don't know who you're going to impact. You don't know whose story you're telling. You don't know who you're saying. You're meeting somebody and they're saying, gosh, I'm not alone. I'm not the only one. There's somebody else who feels like this. Maybe there's hope for me. And you don't know where somebody is. Now, I've suffered from clinical depression. I've been suicidal. I know what it's like to feel alone and to feel defective and like I am the only one feeling that. And there's not a single other person on this planet who would understand. And when you can go into your heart and share what's really on it, whether you're scared or not, just trust that somebody is going to hear you. You're going to serve someone. Not only that, but you're going to feel so good about yourself because it is freaking brave. And you're going to start building that courage muscle. And then the next time you get the opportunity to speak up, instead of being quiet, you're going to say, wait, that doesn't feel right to me. That doesn't sound right to me. That's not right. Stop. It could be anything. And you're going to be building that courage muscle over and over, and also giving other people permission to do the exact same thing. Because we are all meant for something. We are all here for a mission that nobody else can do like we can. You ever hear something for like the 20th time, but you finally heard it? Like, oh my gosh, the way you said that to me, I finally got it. I've heard that concept, I don't know how many times, but there's a way that you said it that I finally got it. Well, people are going to say that about you too, because you have a different frequency than everybody else. You have different experience that's going to enrich a concept, and someone's going to hear it from you in a way they couldn't possibly hear it from anybody else. So never, ever, ever shut your mouth. No, I'm kidding. Shut it. But keep speaking your truth, and then listen. Listen to everything. Listen to what people are saying. Listen to what people are not saying. Listen to what their heart is emitting. What kind of energy are they emitting? What kind of emotions are they feeling? Listen to that. And then allow your intuition, allow God's source spirit to speak through you to that person to reach their heart, whether you can see them or not. Right now, I'm talking into a camera, but I feel people. I know that my words will impact someone. And that's how I speak. When I go to do an episode, I pray, Holy Spirit, get me out of the way and speak through me. Let me have an impact on one person. The one person who needs to hear this today. And that's it. I just trust. I trust that whoever this is meant for will hear it and will be uplifted and will make different choices. And if that's you, I invite you to be vulnerable today, be authentic today, share your heart, share it with somebody, and drop into your heart and really ask, like, who gets to hear from me today? And it's so impactful when you actually call someone and say, hey, you were really on my heart and mind. And they'll think, wow, who, me? Yes, you. Like, God sent me a message, like, I got the bat phone, like, call this person. And when you actually do it, wait to see what an impact you make when you share your heart. Thank you so much for watching Irresistible You, Ignite Your Passion and Purpose. I'm your host, Karen Seltz. Tune in next week. I have a very special guest. We are going to have such a fun conversation. It is somebody I know from my Dr. Joe Dispenza meditation group. And his name is John Pepper. And this man thinks differently than anyone I've ever met. And every time we talk, I'm like, oh my gosh, that's awesome. And the way that he interprets concepts and truth is so incredible. And then we have these amazing conversations. So tune in. It's going to be super exciting. And I'll see you right here next week.